How is the world writing about India today? Hello and welcome to The Print. I'm Vidhi Bhutra and this is Global Pulse, our daily space to take a look at global media's hot takes and analyses on India's most pressing issues of the day. We look at a wide range of media reports, from original ground reports from field correspondents to opinion pieces by renowned columnists. For Indian students, it has been a trying year, appearing for national level competitive exams marked by allegations of paper leaks and concerns over student suicides. And the government's response is being considered lukewarm at best. Financial Times reports on India's brutal testing process in which millions of students partake in the hopes of getting a decent university education. FT correspondent Michael Stott begins the report by describing a heartbreaking moment after an aspiring medic was refused entry to a national exam because she arrived a few minutes late. Her despairing father charged the closed metal gates with his head and collapsed to the ground, his sobbing child beside him. Stott also points out that around 20 students killed themselves not being able to take the pressure of a retest after the NEET UG paper leak. India's exam system, as the report notes, typifies the ills of the world's biggest education system. A tiny minority scrabble for a decent university education, while the majority are weeded out and condemned to low paying jobs, it adds. To drive home the point, Stott gives some numbers, which, although very well known, usually slip through the cracks. Just 1,30,000 of the more than 2 million who took the NEET exam last month will win a university place to study medicine. Other entrance exams are even more competitive. In the Indian Railways entrance exam, of the 18.7 million people who applied for the job in 2024 and 2025, only 43,781 applicants were hired. He writes, a lucky few school leavers secure a good degree and a fast track to an international career. But for the majority of the population, there's only disappointment on the other side of these exams. The Economist gives a list of objects falling on Indians and crushing them to death, and the list seems to have no end. The column highlights that several people have died due to trees falling on people amidst heavy rains in Mumbai. It says by July 7th, 830 trees had fallen compared with 855 in all of 2025, along with 1,238 branches. An 11-year-old was crushed inside his school bus, an 18-year-old on his bike, a 63-year-old outside his shop. However, as the column notes, trees are not the only things falling and crushing people to death, nor is monsoon the only time when the crushing is happening. Everything that can crush someone has crushed someone in India, including an actual anvil. On just one day this month, a jamun tree cracked a man's skull, a tanker overturned and squashed two people in an auto rickshaw, and a trash mountain tumbled onto a building, which then collapsed, trapping 12. India is the land of death from above, the column notes. Among the things that have fallen on the people in recent years are slabs of concrete, iron rods, iron pipes, iron plates, a 40,000 kg block of iron, a piling rig, a crane's trolley, and various sections of under construction bridges. Airport terminal canopies have collapsed in Delhi, Jabalpur, and Rajkot, the column adds. And when under construction structures are not falling, it's the old and flailing ones that are. In 2024, the column notes an illegal billboard, three times the maximum permitted size, collapsed and killed 17 people at a petrol pump. Nine workers were killed at a steel plant in June after a bucket dropped molten metal at 1600 degrees Celsius on them. What is the response then? The column asks. The response is usually to suspend some officials, arrest a scapegoat, or offer ex gratia compensation and move on, it jibes. Meanwhile, Tej Parekh writes for Financial Times about why India is not able to make it to global premier football leagues. The world's most populous nation has never made it to FIFA, and China played once in the FIFA Men's World Cup in 2002. Parekh says, in theory, a large population should translate into a broad talent pool, but few Chinese or Indian footballers have emerged on the global stage. Nor have the vast diasporas from either country featured prominently in elite European leagues. Both also underperform relative to their economic strength, which can serve as a proxy for a nation's ability to invest in sports. Parekh concludes that this year's tournament has demonstrated how strong labor and capital pools are important but not sufficient conditions for success. Along with the size of the economy and population, institutions, access, and culture matter just as well, if not more. And as Parekh says, for India, expenditure on physical recreation was not a priority until recently. He writes, this meant training facilities and coaching networks did not develop outside of a few states such as West Bengal and Goa, where colonial influences had embedded grassroots participation in football. Another problem that Parekh identifies is the attitude towards sports that Indians generally display. The Indian education system requires students to participate in high stakes competitive exams to access good quality college education. This displaces leisure time and contributes to poor grassroots participation in football, he writes. Now we move on to the next report by Sherlyn Mollin of the BBC. Sherlyn Mollin of the BBC reports that Indian Muslim judge is facing online threats after she convicted 14 cow vigilantes in a 2022 mob lynching case. On 12th June, the additional district and sessions judge of a court in Madhya Pradesh, Tabassum Khan, found the men guilty of offences including murder, attempt to murder, rioting, and wrongful restraint. In 2022, 50-year-old Nazir Ahmed was transporting cattle at night and was intercepted by a group of self-styled Gorakshaks, armed with sticks and rods. Ahmed later succumbed to his injuries, while the two other men with him, who were also assaulted, survived to tell the court what had happened. Khan, in her judgment, noted that the incident was a case of mob lynching. However, her verdict has made her a target of religious hate. In the days following the judgment, numerous videos abusing and threatening Khan, a Muslim, surfaced online. The videos implied that Khan had acted against the men because they were Hindu, Mollin reports. In another video, a man also warned of bloodshed across the country unless the convicted men were freed within 10 days, the report notes. Jeremy W. Peters and Pragati KB of the New York Times report on Gymkhana Club as fear of eviction grips its members. The club was asked to give show cause by 7 July against the eviction orders. The Gymkhana, sitting in the heart of Lutyens, Delhi, on a 27-acre lush green plot, is facing extinction under what the report calls Modi's campaign to purge India of residual slave mentality. According to the report, members of the club say that Modi is trying to send a message through the eviction notice that the days when Delhi's old elite ran India are over. It's a specific type of westernized Indian who never bought Modi's rhetoric, who Modi thinks never accepted him. Abhishek Tanka, a businessman who frequents the club, told the NYT. The report says that the stereotypical Gymkhana member, who sometimes had to wait more than 20 years before being offered a spot, is the kind of person who has lost the most clout in the new India Mr. Modi says is rising under his watch, a country where secular, democratic principles of its founders are giving way to his vision of a Hindu First Nation.